And if you had to just sort of sum it up in a paragraph, how has Green Hill changed in the years you've been there?
Well, the level of violence has definitely increased. Before, residents pretty much had a code where they would fight, but if staff got involved, they would immediately stop. Now, not only don't they stop when staff get involved, they're pushing us away, they're escaping from us. In some cases, they're turning around confronting us, and in some cases, turning around and hitting us. We're getting the most violent and aggressive youth in the state, the ones that have committed the worst crimes, murderers, rapists, kidnappers, those type of things. So it's no longer the population I dealt with when I started 23 years ago. We'd literally have kids who came in for having a suspended license and driving. That's not the case now. Pretty much every resident in there has some type of violent offense in their history.
How did we get from there, back in the old days, to here where we are now?
Well, in the perception of staff, we used to have very strict sanctioning guidelines. We had what we called the standard rules of conduct, and they were ranked by level from 1 to 5. 5 was the most egregious. And then went away from that system, and it's a lot blurrier now.
So administration isn't allowing you to hold the kids accountable?
That is the perception of the staff, yes. Admin will tell you a different story, but we're not being given the tools we feel that we need in order to hold them properly accountable for their actions. And so because of that, residents start to feel emboldened. Well, I didn't get punished for this, or I didn't have a sanction for this, so I'm going to do this now. And so that line of where the consequence eventually lands on them is getting pushed further and further forward. And that makes staff very uneasy. That's why staff are leaving, because they're like, well, I don't know what I can do to these kids to stop their behavior, so I'm going to leave. Staff turnover is terrible. When I started there, they said, you'll be lucky if you get a permanent job in 2 years. And in order to get a day shift, you're going to have to work here 10 years. Now we are literally hiring staff off the street into day shift counselor spots because nobody wants to work here. So that's one of the biggest changes, is how much of a turnover we have in our staff and the sense of staff not feeling safe at work.
How do you feel, safety-wise, when you go to work?
I don't feel safe. I don't feel like, on the whole, that the Green Hill is safe. But there's a lot of residents that have, in my unit, have poor impulse control. And they will even assault staff that they like once they get, basically kind of in a psychotic mood. And so there's always that possibility.
In some of the write-ups, there is what was described as a riot in the central kitchen in May.
That was pretty bad. There was a group of residents from one living unit, and they're primarily, the gang members were Sureños. And there was another living unit eating up there, and there were members of some Asian Pacific Islander gangs. And there had been an incident 2 or 3 days earlier in which some Sureños had attempted to attack their rivals, and there were some Asian Pacific Islander gang members present, and they defended the Sureños' rivals. They fought with the Sureños. And so as payback, the next Saturday, when they knew staffing is low, and there weren't a lot of staff on the Hill to respond, they basically swarmed over kitchen walls and around kitchen walls and ran to the other unit. I think there were somewhere around 20 residents that attacked about 8 other residents. And there were so many residents involved that staff literally had no control. They were calling for help, which is a code 1, means every staff available, come, you shut down your unit, leave one staff in the unit, everybody else responds. And even with all the staff that were available to respond on the Hill, they still couldn't control the situation. There were in some reports where residents fought until they were too tired to fight. There are situations where staff would grab one resident, pull him on the ground. 2 other residents would come over and start trying to kick that resident in the head. So the staff had to let the resident go to defend himself, because we're not going to stand there or hold on to a kid while another kid's assaulting him. And there's instances where residents were pushing staff down, pushing away from them. Several staff were injured during that incident. And really, I don't see that much has been done to address that.
By its nature, it's a dangerous environment, but how much of this violence is because of mismanagement by the administration?
I would have to say that more than 50% of it is. And our policies have been slowly going more and more towards where residents don't fear consequences for their actions. And that is totally on administration. We don't make policy at the line level. These are your sons, your brothers, in some cases, a few cases, your husbands, that we're dealing with, and we want to not only help them do better in their lives, but keep society safe. That's our job. And I don't think that message gets across. And also, legislature members, because of the fact we deal with juveniles, even though we have them up to the age of 21 and now 25, they don't think the situation's as dire as in like Western and Eastern State Hospital or in the Department of Corrections facilities, but they are. They're the same issues that they have there. It's because we're dealing with children or kids. They don't see this has the same impact on the staff there.